Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about two of our favorite sustainability assessments here at 3R, GRESB and EcoVadis. Lucky for you all, we have two experts on the assessments here today to discuss how one can streamline their submissions. We'll be using the Q&A feature today, so if you have any questions, please take advantage of having access to these two brilliant minds on both GRESB and EcoVadis. Before jumping in, I'd like to give you guys a bit of a context of who we are. 3R Sustainability is a full-service consulting firm that works on a variety of clients from different industries. 3R supports sustainability management systems, climate-related work, and target setting. We also support with energy reduction projects and efficiency within the built environment, as well as our third-party assurance and validation services, SAS. Those can really support your GRESB and EcoVadis scores. So if you need support with verification and assurance, reach out and we can connect you with sustainability assurance services. I'm really proud of our webinar program and excited for the next couple of sessions. I've heard a lot of clients say they are stressed about SBTI, so we're catering to you guys. Again, the focus on sustainability assurance is so important in these times, especially with some backlash in sustainability. So in June, we're going to be focusing on enhancing trust and strengthening business value through sustainability assurance. And then finally, in July, we have a double materiality session on the books. I'm hoping you guys can join that one because the double materiality process really is unlocking strategic business value for a lot of our clients, and we're getting a lot of questions about this. So excited for the next three on the books, and please join our LinkedIn and mailing list to get updates on this and future sessions. Finally, that's enough from me. I'm going to pass it on to my lovely colleagues to walk us through the rest of the session. Remember to use the Q&A feature if you have any questions. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Preston. Yeah, no, excited to talk with you all today. So as Preston mentioned, Valen and I will be talking a lot about GRESB and EcoVadis in particular, but we'll also get into some more general tips and tricks too for just dealing with multiple sustainability assessment submissions at the same time or over the course of the year, and how you can really work to make sure that process is as easy and seamless for you as possible. And so just to get started, we'll of course go ahead and just introduce ourselves. So my name is Teresa. I'm Associate Director of Assurance here at 3R. So a lot of my work is around kind of validation, verification for a variety of different things, such as greenhouse gas inventories or reports or verification of different things. So have kind of that reviewer mindset, but also have some experience with consulting on a few EcoVadis projects as well. But I will say Valen is our real expert in that. So I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Teresa. Hi, everyone. My name is Valen. Thanks for joining. I'm sustainability consultant at 3R2. On my day-to-day, I really primarily support clients with assessments like EcoVadis and GRESB. So this is really the center of the question on the table for me. Outside of these assessments, I also support with strategy, reporting, a little bit of everything. Very excited to be here and share some tips and tricks to help you streamline multiple assessments at a time and be as proactive as possible, as sometimes they can be a beast.
Great. Well, without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump in. So just to kind of discuss what we'll be talking about today. So we'll start off with kind of level setting around what GRESB and EcoVadis are, particularly going into really how these two assessments compare. And this will then drive kind of those two subsequent sections of this program around how to actually approach aligning your evidence across these two assessments, and then really getting into some general submission best practices to really make sure that you're putting your best foot forward when you're going to submit to GRESB, EcoVadis, or any of those other multitude of assessments that are out there that you may be submitting to. So to get started, we'll start comparing GRESB and EcoVadis in particular. So I know for a lot of you, EcoVadis is likely what is more familiar, just, with the nature of it's such a wide-ranging assessment across all of the different industries and everything like that. And so wanted, though, to take a minute to discuss what GRESB is, if you're not familiar. So in contrast with EcoVadis, which is really focused across your entire value chain and assessing kind of sustainability performance across environment, labor and human rights, ethics, sustainable procurement, GRESB is really focused and tailored to the infrastructure and real estate sectors. And so it is also focused around providing information about performance in these areas, particularly to financial markets. So we'll talk a little bit more about this when really looking at the comparison between these two assessments. But those are the two kind of big key things to keep in mind when you're thinking about what GRESB is really looking at. So it's looking at ESG topics from that lens of financial markets and with the real estate and infrastructure sectors in mind in particular. So when looking at these two kind of side by side, you'll see here, as I kind of mentioned on the previous slide, the primary audience is one of the biggest drivers of differences between these two assessments. So for EcoVadis, a lot of the use of this assessment is really driven by requesting customers and trading partners. A lot of suppliers are either requiring or asking their or they're requesting customers or asking their suppliers to submit to EcoVadis in order to, even retain their business or to increase their business. And increasingly, there's a lot of drivers not only to submit, but to, achieve a specific minimum score or have a certain amount of improvement. Similarly, on the GRESB side, this is happening as well, but it's much more investor driven. So a lot of the push for real estate and infrastructure companies to submit to GRESB is from their investors in those funds and portfolios. And so similarly, they have drivers from those investors saying, you need to either submit or to, achieve a certain rating level or level of improvement over the years. And then, as I mentioned, the relevant industry sectors, EcoVadis really cross-cuts across all industries when GRESB is focused on real estate and infrastructure. And then the cadence. So both of these are annual assessments, but for EcoVadis, this is essentially a rolling submission. So you could submit any time over the course of the year, and then come that time of year again, the next year, you'll be ready to submit again, but it is flexible over, it could be any time of year when you initially submit. When GRESB is an annual assessment that has a very defined cadence of opening on April 1st for that portal and then having to submit your assessment by July 1st each year, that timing stays exactly the same. And so beyond kind of just the logistics of these two assessments, the scoring focus of the two, I think, really gives good insight into kind of how these two assessments are approaching sustainability and what they're really looking to get out of the information that companies are supplying. So for EcoVadis, as you'll see here, the scoring on each of those themes, so environment, labor and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement, is based on companies' performance across those three kind of management layers, as they say: policies, actions, and results. And then that overall score is a weighted average of those theme scores, taking into account those kind of size and some other factors. But as you can see there, it's a little bit fairly evenly distributed across policies, actions, and results, a little more focused kind of on those actions in particular. But looking then over on the right side of the screen there with GRESB, you'll see 70% in real estate, 60% in performance or 60% in infrastructure of the score is focused on performance. And so when you're going to submit to these, you'll notice that, I'm sure, with EcoVadis, there's a lot of kind of more stringent documentation requirements that we'll talk to in a little bit. When with GRESB, you are going to have a lot more granularity in the performance data that you're expected to provide. And this is really, driven by the fact that EcoVadis really has that focus more on kind of overarching management system. As I say here with the assessment emphasis, they are looking to see more kind of holistically how these issues are being managed, while that is certainly addressed in GRESB, they are also very, very focused on performance, particularly in those environmental metrics and that year-over-year improvement of your energy, water, waste, and emissions. So that kind of gives a little bit more context to those differences. And in terms of one last thing to discuss with regards to their comparison is they're both benchmarks, which is certainly important to keep in mind as well. This benchmarking function actually is very similar across both assessments with EcoVadis, that metal allocation. So whether you're getting bronze, silver, gold, platinum, is dependent on your performance relative to all companies that are being assessed. So regardless of your industry, your size, your location, and that is calibrated on an ongoing basis. So as companies submit, EcoVadis is taking, all of those results from that past year on a rolling basis, and providing that output benchmark. And with GRESB, similarly, your GRESB rating is based on its position relative to the global performance of all reporting entities within either the real estate sector or the infrastructure sector, depending on the assessment you're submitting. But similarly, you are getting that kind of wide-ranging benchmark as opposed to really being focused within similar companies. So that is enough, I think, about kind of the two assessments, but just wanted to level set that. We'll now move to kind of the portion of the program where we'll discuss a little bit more on how to actually go about submitting to both of these and generally approaching multiple submissions in general. So I'll turn it back over to Valen and she'll start going through that.
All right, thanks, Teresa. So as Teresa just mentioned, EcoVadis and GRESB are both very strong tools. They do come at sustainability assessment from slightly different angles, but at the end of the day, they are both trying to answer this very same question. That is, how well is your company managing your ESG impact? So that really brings us to our next kind of discussion point. That is, what are the commonalities between these assessments and where you can start strategizing for streamlining and creating synergies. So this slide really highlights the core ESG topics commonly covered in EcoVadis, GRESB, and also other assessments as well. Also in EcoVadis, that is called your key sustainability issues. So things like environmental topics, which includes areas like biodiversity, energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, wastewater management, pollution, etc. Though you'll see that terminology and the categorization aren't always identical. For example, customer health and safety is considered an environment issue in EcoVadis, but is grouped under a social topic, as we're showing here on the slide for GRESB. Sustainable procurement is another different, it is an environmental topic for GRESB, but it is its own theme for EcoVadis. Social topics are fairly similar. Topics like labor practices, employee engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, human rights, safety, although like environment, the labeling isn't exactly mapped one for one, the essence is very similar as well. On the governance side, we are seeing an even stronger alignment between these two assessments. Anti-corruption, cybersecurity, data privacy, whistleblower protection, fraud, all topics are on top of mind for both. Note that GRESB is slightly more industry specific, so all companies are given the same set of material topics as we're showing on this slide. The weightings for these topics might vary slightly depending on whether you're getting a real estate assessment or the infrastructure assessment. On the EcoVadis side, it does customizes material topics based on your industry, and you'll be customized with a tailored questionnaire based on your country in size and where you're operating as well. Now, in terms of how these topics are being assessed, this is really where you're starting to see how the methodology and the structure that are underpinning these assessments benchmarks systems can be similar and where the nuances can be. So most of these questions you're answering map back to three very crucial components in management system. like Teresa just mentioned, policies, actions, and performance. Regardless of the assessment that you're doing, they are looking at how your company is managing what's material to you. So how you are having, whether you're having a stated sustainability objectives and targets in place, what measures or actions you're implementing to achieve those goals, if and how you're measuring your progress, whether you're reporting and communicating to your stakeholders, which can then again advise back to the policies and actions that you're doing. It is really the idea of plan, do, check, act, which is a concept that many of you might already be familiar with. The idea that management is an iterative process where you're using established and set targets, act on whether you're acting on your action plan, and then using the outcomes from the actions to then inform and fine-tune your overall strategy. Note that for EcoVadis, these components are directly mapped back to the three management layers: policies, measures, and results, policies, actions, and results. It is leaning much more on assessing the overall management systems, since they don't assess you on the actual footprint, but rather whether you're doing the right thing, that is tracking and your progress and reporting out. For GRESB, on the other hand, this is a very important difference here. That is, they are looking at your year-over-year performance improvement in their performance section. So again, this is speaking to the difference between these assessments and where they're putting their emphasis on. And that could inform what resources or actions you are prioritizing when preparing for these assessments. And just taking a step back, while we are focusing on EcoVadis and GRESB today, the structure and the themes here are pretty consistent across all other major ESG assessments we're seeing, like CDP, Next Integrity. I'm seeing a lot of our clients are doing that, and others, or even just the customized questionnaire that you'll be getting from your customers. So getting familiar with these core framework can really set you up for success across the board. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so for both assessments and really for any evidence-based assessment, meaning you need to prove what you claim you're doing, you can really take advantage of a few of these key documentations that you very well might already have in your organization. On the slide, you're seeing how documents like sustainability reports, ESG policies and procedures, employee handbook, risk assessments, certifications and assurance reports, how these documents can be used for a variety of different indicators to support. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I do want to flag some quick things. A lot of these documents are very versatile. For example, your sustainability report can be used to support a wide range of questions, from policies, measures, reporting indicators. If you're interested in learning more of that, we do have a past webinar that is on maximizing responses with your sustainability report. So definitely check it out on our website. Another note that I want to highlight is that it's not just about what kind of document you have, it's also about how you're using it. So think about the intent behind the question. The same document might support different questions depending on how you're framing it. You definitely want to use the metrics section on the report for the reporting indicator, but you might want to use the management section where you discuss how you are managing your material topic for the policy, sustainability objectives, and even the actions that you're doing. So you do want to tailor what sections you're highlighting based on what you're being asked. And then finally, both assessments really offer very helpful guidance on what kind of evidence count and what specific elements they're looking for. So definitely be sure to check that while you're looking to use these documentation to support and ensuring that you're hitting the right notes. Now that we've covered these commonalities for the assessments, we're going to jump into some really quick tips and tricks and best practices of how you can best streamline preparation for multiple assessments, as it sometimes can be time consuming and often overwhelming to juggle between. Hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have a clearer roadmap for how to handle multiple assessments like an expert. So looking at this slide, if I have one key takeaway, that would be proactive. We want to find synergies across these assessments. As I've mentioned previously, there are a lot of overlap, so definitely be strategic about standardizing the data points and how you're talking about your actions, and reuse the content or your responses thoughtfully throughout. For example, the reporting indicators are universal for a lot of the assessments. Report on the data on XYZ topics, and that's basically it. Another example that came to mind is the whistleblower procedures. So both EcoVadis and GRESB are asking for it. You do want to be careful about knowing exactly what these two assessments ask for. For GRESB, it is simply just looking for whether you have the procedure, and that's it. For EcoVadis, it does have to clearly, you do have to clearly show that there is a dedicated channel for reporting, that it is accessible to everybody. It protects anonymity and prohibits retaliation. So be careful with including these elements in your document to be credited for both assessments. So that also speaks to our next kind of tip, which is keep a running library of your previous responses, which can then be reused for the future, in the future, for reducing any redundant work. Even within one single assessment, as the last slide has alluded to, you can definitely find opportunities for synergies too by leveraging one versatile document like the report, the employee handbook, to answer multiple questions. Our next step is to simplify the information collection process. A very common challenge we do see in clients is that they have siloed data. So teams scrambling to track down the numbers from stakeholders, who are often very busy. So instead of chasing down spreadsheet, we do recommend building a centralized data collection system, a repository of all ESG data, to avoid last-minute scramble or any key stakeholder holdup. If it's possible, use automation tools or cloud platforms to streamline this step. It is really efficient way to streamline and simplify the whole process, as it reduces human errors too, frees up so many different resources that you can otherwise use for other important tasks. Automation is your friend. If automation is not feasible yet, then we also very highly recommend using a set cadence to collect KPIs. So every month or every 2 months or even quarterly, ask key stakeholders to update their department numbers in a centralized spreadsheet. So again, this should also be built into the day-to-day job, so it feels like a part of their job, not on top of. Other than that, too, then syncing up the collection timeline for key information can make the process as seamless as possible for stakeholders. Say you're preparing for both EcoVadis and GRESB at the same time. Both assessments ask for, say, how you're managing your energy consumption and carbon emissions, but the questions they are asking, the information might be slightly different. So instead of sending 2 separate requests, consolidate them in one request can be super helpful. And remember, EcoVadis submission is rolling, so that allows some flexible submission timeline. If you can align it with your internal data reporting or report preparation cycle, definitely take advantage of that. Engage cross-functional teams. This is also very important as assessments tend to touch so many different parts of your business. So it's very critical to bring in stakeholders involved and engage as early as possible to prevent any last minute crunch. Procurement for supply data, facilities for energy data, and HR for labor practices, legal compliance for any corruption related or business ethics related questions. You definitely also do want to manage the whole process like a standalone project. So set up regular check-ins, define responsibilities for stakeholders, and hold them accountable. It will make the whole process a much smoother and way less stressful at the end. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So as you are gathering and submitting your evidence, as you've done, and you are managing the process like a pro, a few key things that can really help push you towards that finish line when it comes to how to best prepare and improve the clarity in your document for the assessment reviewers. When you're updating policies or drafting key documents, have the assessment requirements in mind, ideally the stricter ones. That way you are really building alignment into your documents from the start. You also want to be concise with how many documents you are uploading. Sometimes less is more. You want to stick to what's relevant and make sure that those information doesn't get buried in, I don't know, 200 page of PDFs or a giant zip file. And finally, make it super clear, reference the exact page numbers and linking back to the question of how your document is supporting that. Highlight or call out any specific sections can be helpful. Providing a bit of a context if it not super clear to help connect the dots. So it is so that your document and evidence is as clear as possible and that you can reduce the ambiguity in your document. So again, the goal here is really less is more, but make sure what you're including is spot on and easy to find for the reviewers. So with that, we've covered a lot of ground, from how to strategize, to prep stage, to tailoring your evidence, to how to reduce ambiguity in your document. To bring it together, I'll turn it back to Teresa for a quick recap of some of the key takeaways.
Yeah, thanks, Valen. So certainly with this, I think, there's a lot of pain points sometimes to having multiple submissions that you have to do, whether that's, different customers requesting different things, or, just the nature of kind of your business. You kind of have pieces that need to be submitting to GRESB while overall you need to be submitting to EcoVadis, or whatever the reasoning might be, that you have a lot of different assessments on your plate. These kind of tips and tricks that Valen spoke to, I think, are critical not only for making the assessment process as seamless as possible, but also for really having your sustainability efforts as kind of embedded in your overall business strategy as possible. You don't want to have, okay, here's our stuff that we throw to EcoVadis, here's, this separate thing we have to put together to go to GRESB. Like, there might be a little bit of that, just the nature of kind of the different questions in the assessments, but as much as you can kind of use those assessments to guide how you're formulating things like your policies or what you're including in your reports, I think it makes it much clearer to stakeholders within your business as well about what is really important to us, what are we really doing with regards to all of these issues, and how can we really continue to improve year over year with regard to all of these issues. I think not only from a submission perspective, but really from a sustainability management perspective, these tips are very, very helpful. And we've seen with clients how helpful I think it can be to really drive actual improvement and change within the organizations, and not just treating this as a check the box, get the assessment in, but really, using those assessments to improve. So at this point, though, enough from us. We certainly want to hear from you all. If you had any questions whatsoever about anything we talked about, we would certainly be happy to answer anything you have with regards to the 2 assessments or kind of these tips and tricks for submitting multiple assessments.
Thank you both so much. It's super helpful. We have 1 question, hopefully more. Keep them coming. How can we create a long-term strategy for ESG reporting instead of treating it as an annual project? Maybe someone's trying to communicate with their leadership on this one.
Sure, I'm happy to talk a little bit about this, but Valen, please do jump in as well. So I think with this in particular, it is hard, honestly, to kind of not just, do it once, kind of forget about it until it comes around the next year. I think one important key thing that Valen spoke to that's really critical for this is kind of looking for those synergies up front, so that you're really not just thinking about EcoVadis when it comes around. You're thinking about it kind of year round as okay, it's time for our, yearly review of our policies. Like, let's consider these assessment requirements while we're doing that and make sure that, we're tailoring those updates to anything we might need for that, as well as, just thinking about going forward, kind of how we want to actually continually update these. And also, I think in particular, not just, creating the policy and then letting it float out there. It's something where it's very important to engage those cross-functional teams, as she spoke to, and really communicate. I think it's such a cliche, but communication is, I think, key in so much of this, that you're really sharing out across the whole organization on a regular basis, in kind of sharing what is going on at the organization with regards to all of these issues. What are those next things we need to be working on with regards to any initiatives and assessments and all of that. And so it really is continual improvement over the course of the year, so that you're not scrambling at the last minute, which is always difficult. But Valen, I don't know if you have anything you'd add to that as well.
Yeah, no, I think Teresa is spot on 2 key points that I really want to talk about. That is really building the assessment into the overall business management, and then seeing it as a continual improvement rather than just a one-off action to check off the box. I know there's a lot of talk about how, yes, sustainability is really just this beautiful add-on thing to your business. It doesn't really add any value, but that is we're seeing increasing demand on the customer side to start requiring minimum scores for you to maintain the business relationship, for you to stay on the table. So I think communicating that and speaking to the business values of having a good sustainability management system is super important on bringing leadership on board. You definitely also want to start with where you want to be from like 2 to 3 years from now, and then start building a multi-year roadmap, since you can't just build a building from scratch over one night, right? Maybe start with internal management reviews with some of the most key data that is most relevant to your business, and then gradually, if we're seeing any improvements that can be done, you really want to focus your resources and people power, manpower to the topics that are most important to you, right? Maybe start with a pilot program and then gradually expand your initiatives to a more broad-based corporate-wide program, going from internal reviews to start really publishing a external report that covers a lot of different aspects of your business. And one final point I do want to also talk about is really use these annual assessment as checkpoints, not the end goal. The more sustainability becomes a part of your overall day-to-day operation, the less it feels like a one-off fire drill, but more as a oh, where this is where we are, how we can improve over time. Here's are the key points that we still need to work on, but here's are the strengths that we've improved over the couple of years that we've worked on this.
Thank you both. That's helpful. I love the concept of bringing everyone in to the table too, because I had so many projects where the sales team learns what we're doing and they're so excited because they have all this information that they can communicate to their clients. So you never know who might be interested in be your kind of internal champion. We have another clarifying question. Is all evidence that is uploaded to EcoVadis and GRESB meant to be publicly available documents, or can there be internal documents as well?
Sorry, Valen, I saw you on mute too, but definitely internal is fine for many of the documents. So as you're going through, definitely check on each individual kind of question on if there's any intent that, like I know in GRESB in particular, that reporting question is intended to be public disclosure or disclosure at least to your investors. But like something like your policies, do not need to be public. So, and there's, I know within that, at least like a check box that you can select or unselect, depending on whether or not you would like the document itself to be shared with your investors or not. So certainly, yeah, the intent is not that all of this is publicly available. I know in a lot of cases, there are things that are certainly private in terms of your policies or things like that. And in general, I would say the assessments are pretty good about being cognizant of what is typical at a corporation with regards to things that need to be kept private, or often to, in both cases, you're really needing to share what is relevant to the question. So like I know with GRESB in particular, they have things of like, you can redact parts of the policy that, you may not want to share that's not really relevant to the question, that that's absolutely fine as long as a reviewer can see what they need to see to make sure that you're meeting the requirements set out by the questions in the assessment. That's really the key point in terms of what you're supplying.
Yeah, and another point you do want to check in terms of scoring is sometimes public document, like especially in the reporting indicators. I know for EcoVadis, a public report can sometimes score more, and there is a bonus point to making documents public. So that is the case in the reporting section. I know there's some sensitive information that you definitely don't want to share with external stakeholders. Feel free to white out those any sensitive information that you have in the document, but also do still show that the structure is there, like the key points that EcoVadis or GRESB is looking for. The subtitles, the headlines, the headings, those can be helpful to demonstrate, even though you're not showing the exact body of the text.
Thanks. One more question. How far in advance should we begin preparing for these assessments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically I would say for a first-time submitter, there's nothing as too early to start. You do want to start as soon as there's such a requirement for you. That gives you enough time to gather evidence, get together stakeholders to talk about the requirements, identify gaps, and have ample time to prepare for it. For recurring assessments, for resubmitters, you can typically start 3 months out. That's typically the timeline that 3R recommends if you work with us. But we do still recommend preparing on a rolling basis. Like I've mentioned, reusing the previous responses, identify key gaps from the last submission as early as possible, so you can start building on your improvement plans and put together enhanced documentation for the next submission around.
Thank you. All right, last call, everyone. Use that Q&A feature. I'm gonna give it like 5 seconds, and if not, we can kind of start to wrap it up. Any last minute thoughts from either of you presenters want to share today?
I don't think so. No, it's been thank you all certainly for joining, but I think that pretty much covered it. And definitely check out some of those, as we said, some of those other webinars too. And 3R's website will go into even more detail and kind of specific aspects of this. So I think those could be really helpful for a bunch of you as well.
Agreed. Yeah. And if you have any other questions, we'll be sending the recording soon, and you can respond to that or through our website. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.